An appeals court in Washington is weighing former President Donald Trump's claim he is shielded from federal prosecution. Trump is arguing he is immune from prosecution because the actions he's accused of happened while he was in the White House. Federal prosecutors and the former president's lawyers made their cases this morning.
To authorize the prosecution of a president for his official acts would open a Pandora's box from which this nation may never recover.
The president has a unique constitutional role, but he is not above the law. Separation of powers principles, constitutional text, history, precedent, and other immunity doctrines all point to the conclusion that a former president enjoys no immunity from criminal prosecution.
Special counsel Jack Smith has charged former President Trump with 4 criminal counts stemming from an alleged scheme to overturn the 2020 election. Trump has pleaded not guilty to all charges. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now. So, Scott, tell us about how the former president acted in court. What did you see?
The former president came in here moments before the hearing began and left moments later out of an underground secured garage. He didn't spend a whole lot of time here at the courthouse, but he was there in the room, sitting and listening, and it's quite likely, Elaine, certainly a possibility, that his presence may have impacted some of the tenor and the words chosen by his attorney in this case, John Sauer. As part of his arguments and part of his responses to the court, Trump's attorney, Sauer, made references to President Biden's handling of the border, former President Clinton's handling of presidential pardons, called Donald Trump the clear leader in all the polls. The type of rhetoric, the type of political arguments Trump's been making on the stump were synthesized into the arguments today, Elaine, by his lawyers before this 3-judge panel.
Interesting. So is that perhaps, do we have an idea of why the former president opted to appear in court today?
It was voluntary. He was under no mandate to be here, but perhaps it's no coincidence that roughly 45 to 60 minutes after the hearing wrapped, the former president spoke before cameras nearby, in essence, potentially speaking to his voters or future supporters. This really was a striking hearing in its tenor, in some of the language used. It went about an hour and 15 minutes. 3 judges on this appeals court hearing arguments over whether Trump is shielded by and enjoys presidential immunity, that he can't be prosecuted for election conspiracy for acts taken while he was in office. The questions the judges asked and the language they used were so striking in the word choice and in the tenor. One judge asked Trump's lawyer if a future president could order a SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his chief political rival, if a future president could sell pardons if presidential immunity exists. And the answers were not so clear-cut to those questions. That's part of what these judges are grappling with, Elaine, is what is presidential immunity? Does it exist if there are official acts that are the center of allegations?
Scott, let me ask you about something you said a moment ago, is that there was sort of a political undercurrent infused with some of the legal arguments that we heard from the lawyers today. I'm wondering, is it likely that we will hear the former president use this appearance and other legal challenges that he's facing as part of what we will hear on the campaign trail moving forward?
Well, the timing's noteworthy, isn't it? Less than a week till the Iowa caucuses, and the former president was not in Iowa. He was here, though he was under no responsibility or requirement to be here, at the courthouse. He had no speaking role today. It's appellate court. The parties very infrequently will show up for appellate arguments in their cases. So it certainly begs the question, is this a political tool? Is this a political means for the former president to garner more support? But Elaine, ultimately, this hearing was, relatively speaking, bare bones. An hour and 15 minutes, almost exactly what they forecast. It was nimble. It was quick. The judges pressed with questions. They didn't hear a lot of unsolicited arguments. And the clear issue is, when will they rule? When will they determine if this goes back to the trial judge and back to trial date of March 4th? They don't say when they're going to rule. Could be quick, could take weeks, could push back that date.
All right, Scott MacFarlane, one of many reporters, as we can hear in the background there, covering this very high-profile case. Scott, thank you so much. And Jessica Levinson joins us now for more on this. She's a CBS News legal contributor and a professor for Loyola Law School in California. Jessica, can you explain the legal basis for the concept of presidential immunity?
Absolutely. And great reporting from Scott. This was a pretty quick hearing, and they really did focus in on what you just asked me about. What is presidential immunity? So it is this thing that was created by judges. It is a doctrine which says that presidents are not like the rest of us. It says that presidents are entitled to some protection when it comes to their ability to function and their ability to do their job. And so what the doctrine of presidential immunity essentially says is that we want presidents to be able to make decisions without fear that they will constantly face civil suits, for instance. We want presidents to be able to have open and transparent discussions with their high-level advisors without fear that that information could be subpoenaed and could expose them to embarrassment. But it doesn't say, in my view, and none of the precedent says, that presidents are absolutely immune from criminal prosecution. That would mean that the criminal justice system simply doesn't apply to presidents based on actions they took while in office.
Well, how did federal prosecutors counter Trump's claims that he should be shielded from prosecution?
So federal prosecutors, I think, pointed out that the reasons that we have presidential immunity don't apply here. And they also were able to respond to some hypotheticals I think were very harmful for Trump's arguments. For instance, and Scott mentioned this, there was a hypothetical about, for instance, what if a president said, we should assassinate my political opponent? Can it be that that person would escape liability? What if a president said, we should trump up voter fraud? I'm coming up with another hypothetical. Can it be that that president would escape liability? So what I think the Department of Justice did in an effective way is they were able to point out, if this is really what you're claiming, if you're really claiming that presidents escape from any sort of repercussions in the criminal justice system, what about this? What about that? And I think what you saw is a three-judge panel very skeptical of granting all of the Trump team's requests here.
Well, how could the outcome of this case impact other cases against Donald Trump?
So this is a case that's really focused on whether or not the president can face repercussions for actions he took while in office. So we're looking at the federal election interference case. We're also looking at the Georgia election interference case. Here's what we're not looking at. We're not looking at the federal case dealing with the alleged unlawful retention of documents in Mar-a-Lago. We're not looking at the civil fraud case against him. We're not looking at any cases that deal clearly with acts that were either not official acts or actions that were taken after the president left the presidency, after January 6, 2021.
All right. Jessica Levinson. Jessica, thank you.